Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Jazz Cabbage, the show all about demystifying cannabis through a culinary lens. I'm your host, Chala June, and today I'd like to ruminate on a word, a concept, really, that I tend to throw around a lot when talking about the intersections of food and cannabis. I'm talking, of course, about community. American psychiatrist M. Scott Peck defines community in his 1987 book, The Different Drum, as, quote, the coming together of a group of individuals who have learned to communicate honestly with each other, whose relationships go deeper than their masks of composure, and who have developed some significant commitment to rejoice together, mourn together, and to delight in each other and make others' conditions our own. I first encountered Peck's definition of community through one of my all-time favorite books, All About Love by the late, great Bell Hooks. In this seminal work, Hooks dedicates an entire chapter to examining how building loving communion can make us more resilient in the face of cultural and systemic hardships. According to Hooks, communities, quote, sustain life, not nuclear families or the couple, and certainly not the rugged individualist. There is no better place to learn the art of loving than in community, she says. As someone who holds multiple marginalized identities, both Hooks and Peck's words remind me that a better, more liberated, and more loving society won't just materialize through wishful thinking, thoughts, or prayers. Rather, it's through being active members of and participants in our communities that we find not only the space to envision a healed world, but the tools to create one. Welcome back to Jazz Cabbage. I'm your host, Chala June, and while we always have a good time here on Jazz Cabbage, something tells me today's episode is going to be an especially fun one, because it's not every day that I get to interview a pair of best friends. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with Christina Wong and Wendy Zheng, the founders and co-hosts of Mogu Magu, a Los Angeles-based collective focused on food, cannabis, and AAPI culture. Wendy and Christina, welcome to Jazz Cabbage. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for having us on.
Hey, Chala. Thanks for having us.
I really can't even begin to explain how excited I am to have you both on this episode, because when I really think deeply about what it looks like to use food and cannabis as these tools for intentional community building and care, I'm genuinely constantly thinking about the two of you. I mean, to give the audience a little backstory, I had first met Christina, I think almost 3 years ago now, at a cannabis conference here in New York City when I was still fairly new to the professional cannabis space. And there was not only an instant connection there, but just so much care and so much intentionality behind how we were able to stay in touch. And we've been able to work together in some really fun ways. And then last fall, when I was going to LA, I was like, so I'm coming to town. I need a place to stay. Please help me out. And not only were you able to help me out and open your home to me, but you also introduced me to Wendy, who also opened her home to me, who I am now also really proud to call a friend. And I just really want to reiterate how deeply grateful I am to be in community with both of you and just for all of the work that you both do.
Thank you for saying that. It's been, really incredible, Chala, to watch your journey as well. And it was incredible to have you stay at our space and just be part of some of the gatherings that were going on and see what we have popping up in LA.
Yeah, and I remember meeting you at that New York event, and it was just like our energies and interests and passions aligned, and it was just so easy to talk to you about this intersection of culinary and cannabis. And I just finally felt, I was like, you get it. You get what I am saying. And I'm so honored to have had you here at my home here at the Fruit and Flower House.
Oh, thank you. And just, there's really something so special about this intersection of food and of cannabis, not only as a lens through which we can really look at the world around us and the communities that we're building, but also as this sort of filter that I think often filters out a lot of the negative energy and really attracts a lot of the people you're meant to be aligned with. And while this journey into the cannabis world can be very rewarding and even life-affirming in certain ways, it's definitely not without its challenges. Even if it seems like we all just kind of get high and eat, which we do, there are no two paths in the cannabis scene and even this culinary cannabis sub-scene that look exactly alike. So I would love for you both to speak to your individual paths in cannabis and what brought you to this work.
Wendy, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, my journey and career in cannabis kind of started through food. So I was in LA doing private chefing and pop-ups, about starting 8 years ago. And when, legalization happened, I was talking to my friends and I'm like, hey, when we do our private pop-ups and our private dinners, we always smoke and we always pass around the table. Now that with legalization open and more people are interested in learn and being part of this culture and experience this lifestyle, what does it mean to open that up to more people? So the first 420 after recreational legalization passed in California, I did my first infused cannabis pop-up called Dumpling Days. And it was all about showcasing dumplings from around the world. Because a lot of cultures have different types of dumplings. You got pierogies, you got steam buns and dumplings and wontons and all these different types of dumpling, even like empanada, right? Just things that are stuffed and fried or steamed or something. And so the whole concept was you walk through this garden and you explore different dumplings, but you're also exploring different cannabis products, whether it's infused sauces or mocktails, and you're also getting a little bit of cannabis education. And from there, it really took off. People were jazzed about not only being able to be in a 420 friendly space, but a space that's actually curated for the exploration of how to incorporate cannabis into these social settings and to connect with each other. And of course, there's like plenty of other people doing that as well now. But I think what made what I was doing stand out is the Asian culture aspect of it, and not just like specifically Chinese where I'm from and my culture, but being an immigrant and child of diaspora. I've always just been really interested in exploring all of the different cultures I got to be a part of and exposed to by being in America. So, it was very Asian focused, but also exploring just immigrant diaspora food through cannabis.
And you were also on a very special edition of Chopped, were you not?
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, that was wild. So, it was like right before the pandemic. I get a call from this casting agent, and they're like, "We have this new show. It's going to be big. It's actually, one of the big networks." And I had no idea what show it was until like 2 weeks before, and they're like, "Oh, it's Chopped, but with cannabis." And because of COVID production restrictions, instead of doing it at the studio in New York where they usually do it, it was out in Palm Springs, and they built this really cool outdoor set, and everything was a play off of cannabis culture. So they had this thing called the greenhouse where you can find all kinds of cannabis products, including the plants themselves, like cannabis sugar, cannabis apple cider vinegar, sriracha honey, you name it. And so you can pop into the greenhouse and use whatever is in there in addition to your mystery box, which they call the mystery stash. So, I went on the show. I was definitely kind of like the underdog of my episode. I think I was like maybe the youngest and, less experienced chef. But I ended up taking home the crown of my episode, which was really, really awesome. And that has led to me being able to do more branded work, working with brands, and because they really saw that I understood how to put cannabis with food and with different products to showcase how it can be used. So I started working with a lot of brands, and also with the prize money and my savings, me and my husband started building this farm to table with cannabis concept, which is where we live and where Chala, you got to visit and stay, where we do a lot of intentional gatherings that where people can eat the veggies that we grow and also smoke the cannabis that we grow here.
And I remember when I saw the Chopped 420 that like Wendy was on, and I was like, who is this badass Asian woman chef on this show? And as we kind of started following each other on Instagram and doing more things, I saw more badass Asian women chefs kicking ass in like cooking with culinary cannabis. And I was like, who are these people? And like, I just remember like you became this person like I just so looked up to, because it was like, wow, like seeing someone's face who looks like mine openly consuming cannabis and like sharing their culture. I remember Hejin, who was a producer on Chopped 420, who's Big Bad Wolf SF on Instagram. I just remember seeing her wearing like that traditional Korean dress and like smoking. And I was like, whoa, that's iconic. And I'm like, who are these people? I need to know.
And that representation is so huge and so important. And Christina, you do a lot of that kind of forward-facing representation work, not just representation work, but that forward-facing culinary cannabis work as a badass Asian woman in the cannabis sphere. And I would love to have you talk to your personal cannabis journey as well.
So I spent my entire career in my 20s and 30s working in food and restaurants. I did PR and marketing and branding with chefs, with high-end restaurants, and then eventually moved into a in-house position at a fast casual like restaurant chain that was all about making farm to fork accessible. So I went from farm to table, like this high-end chef cuisine, and I would do PR and ghost recipe writing for them, and moved into this like casual restaurant scene where I was really at the forefront of that farm to fork movement. And I got to go visit the farms where we grew our ingredients. And there were many of the small farms here in California. We got to help with chores. I got to appreciate that. I got to create these amazing programs and internship programs for foster youth. And from there, I really learned about, where our food comes from and this art of organic food. And so when I was ready and done with that opportunity, I was looking for my next thing. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I really liked that I was in a restaurant startup type vibe before, and I really enjoyed that. So I was looking for something similar and landed a job in-house as head of communications and content at Papa and Barkley, which is one of California's leading wellness companies. And they had a very similar culture, same vibe, sourcing from sun-grown organic cannabis farmers and using these whole plant principles. And I said, wow, this is the type of company I would love to work for and use my skills. And so that's where I learned about cannabis. And when the first time I visited a cannabis farm, it was Emerald Queen's farm up in Humboldt. And I looked around at these huge plants, and there's these giant, tall trees, like they're literally cannabis trees that are like 20 feet tall. And you're just looking up at this canopy. And I'm talking to the farmers, and they're explaining all of these, what they're growing and all these things with the cannabis plant. And I was like, wow, I don't understand like 70% of the words that are coming out of your mouth. And as I understood, and what I realized was I was able to use my farm to fork storytelling and analogies to be able to understand how people grew cannabis, because the principles are exactly the same. I understand what they're saying. It was
Right.
just the jargon that has evolved in the cannabis industry. And so I now get to spend my time helping people choose better cannabis products for themselves and educating people on what types of cannabis, but using food as that analogy in the bridge. Because in the food industry, as Whole Foods came up, Chipotle, if you remember those iconic advertisements that they did, that was like Back to the Farm, I think it was called,
Mm,
with that Willie Nelson song. And people understand those concepts for food, but because cannabis is so new, they don't even understand that it's the exact same thing, but the industry is kind of upside down. We don't value organic, sun-grown, regenerative, just like we would like ingredients or like buying food from the farmer's market or an Erewhon or a Whole Foods. So I spend a lot of my time educating, teaching, and advocating for that now.
And you do a lot of that through your incredible social channels, Fruit and Flower. And you also do some really amazing recipe development too. I still think about that ube pie that you had made. That was something that did indeed change my life.
That pie was so good. I'm so glad you were there for like the process, because like in my mind I had one idea for this like ube cream pie, but like the cream was just not happening. And I'm like, what do I do with this? And the solution was tapioca, and it made this beautiful coconut tapioca pudding whip that was even better.
Even better. It was really incredible. And I really love that you brought up this point of how people really understand these concepts when we're talking about food, when we're talking about getting back to the farm, or we're talking about regenerative, or we're talking about organic. And there's so much of a parallel when it comes to cannabis, but we're not given the consumer education to really think about cannabis in that same way. And so that's why I find that conversations like this, the work that both of you do, and also just in general bringing more attention and intention to the world of cannabis through this culinary lens, is a really great way to get people to start thinking about cannabis in these broader terms beyond just, okay, indica sativa, but we're thinking about sun-grown, we're thinking about organic, we're thinking in these terms that feel more aligned with our lifestyles. Because I personally don't understand how someone can be really intentional and picky about going to the farmer's market twice a week and getting all of their things at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or what have you. And then they're getting their weed at the bodega. They don't know where it's from. They don't know who grew it. They don't know what's in it. And there's such a disparity and such a disconnect between how people are setting up their lives and their lifestyle and how they're able to purchase and access cannabis, which is this plant that has all sorts of benefits for our bodies. So I'm just really excited that we get to jump into this and have this conversation and really talk about it on this level. And so in that vein, I want to talk about Mogu Magu, this incredible event series that the two of you came together and really built from scratch to bring attention and intention not only to these intersections of food and cannabis, but also how they intersect with AAPI culture. So I would love to know more about how your paths finally crossed and how Mogu Magu came to be.
Well, I think I'm pretty sure I slid into Wendy's DMs after fangirling her on the internet. But I feel like our friendship really started, again, like feeling seen, having that representation. And at the time was a really exciting time in LA for cannabis. Like there was a lot of excitement. Friendships kind of started to form. We call them the aunties. There's a lot of Asians in the cannabis industry, especially here in Los Angeles. And we all started hanging out more. And one person in particular, who's like the godmama, like weed mushroom auntie to all of us, she started Potluck Club, and we would get together, we'd eat, we started meeting other Asians. And then I was like, hey, Wendy, you should come to this. And then we met in person. And then we just started getting high together and eating together more and cooking. And I love hanging out with Wendy because she cooks so much good, delicious, like Asian food. And because I came up like working with white European chefs, I make really good like Americana comfort food. Like I'm extra good at making Americana comfort food, but I don't know how to cook Asian food. And so I always joke and I say that like being friends with Wendy, like she teaches me how to be more Asian.
No, it was, I think Christina and I met at a time where I really needed a friend like Christina. It was a very pivotal time in my life, and I was examining a lot of relationships and environments and situations and evaluating whether or not they still should exist in my life as I'm moving forward and growing. And Christina was always somebody who was very encouraging of who I'm becoming. And as much as she credits me with empowering her to explore her Chinese side and heritage more, I think she does the same for me as well. We started smoking and eating together. I think one of the first times I went over to her house and we were just going to have like a chill, girly sesh. And like within 10 minutes, I was like crying and unpacking stuff already. And so it was just like in a good way, not in a bad way, but just, when you are with somebody who sees you so deeply and understand what you're going through so deeply, the waterworks just kind of happen. And so through that, we were like, okay, we know these kind of conversations happen most organically when we feel safe and seen, and cannabis definitely helps with that. I mean, there's so many sessions, right, where other people have felt that way with their community, with their confidants. And so we're like, how can we make these healing and conversations more accessible? And bring in other people in our community, other Asians in LA, to start healing and exploring our heritage together. And that's how Mogu Magu was born. We invited all of these different, what we could jokingly call bad Asians, but really it's just like, to me, they're the cool Asians, they're the black sheeps of the family. They're the ones who see things a little bit differently, a little bit more futuristic and innovative and very creative. And so all of us kind of have this shared experience of not fitting in because we grew up in a culture, whether you are an immigrant like myself, or I grew up in China for 10 years before moving over, or if you were just like a child of immigrants and diaspora, you still carry those cultural beliefs with you, which is to conform, to not be different, to not step outside the line. And all of these Asians who work in cannabis obviously did. And so it's just really, really powerful when you create that kind of gathering, you create that kind of intentional space when you, with all these black sheeps and who feel like, they're the unicorns in their family or whatever. And then you get them all together. You're like, holy shit, we're a pack of unicorns. It's like not that different. We feel more seeing with each other, which is really, really cool. And it just kind of grew from there. And I think every event and every year we evolve it like constantly, depending on what is needed, what kind of representation, what kind of storytelling and narrative is needed at the time so that we can continue this exploration.
Yeah, and no two events are the same. As we started these, it just started over really good food and what we wanted to eat while we were high. And the first one was, we're like, hey, Wendy, what if we threw like a weed hot pot? Wouldn't that be cool? And so we threw a weed hot pot and we had all these different sauces. We invited all of our friends and we did a content day and to amplify each other's voices and brands. And then it just grew and grew and more people came. And as we started hosting more, we decided like, we don't want to always do the same thing over and over again. Like just because we did Lunar New Year one year doesn't mean we have to do it again the next year. We can just do whatever we want. And as they came together, and it just gives us so much creative freedom. It's so satisfying. We get to express our culinary interests. We get to explore some intersectionality. If you look at the photos or the recaps on Instagram, it's hard because all you see is on the surface and it just looks like weed party. But at a deeper level, like there's really hard conversations, and we have them recorded, but we don't share them on Instagram yet, because how could you share something that deep in like 15 seconds or less? That deep healing, like every single event that we do or every conversation that we have planning around this, like I have become a different person since the beginning of our friendship and since we started this. I feel it. Like I can feel the changes in my body. Like when we did an ancestor paper burning ceremony, like I physically felt the weight lift off my shoulder. I carry a lot of the moments and these conversations and these incredible healing moments with me every day. And I think about them often. And I try to think about how do we share more of this. And when we hosted a tamale sesh last year around the holidays with a few of our, like, we call them the motatillas, we just created the space for them to talk and gather. And also I wanted to learn how to make tamales and eat tamales. But the thing that came out that moved me so much was that somebody started the conversation with, nobody else wants to talk to me about this stuff. And I think all of us want to talk about these things, but we don't know how. Our culture, I don't know, for me, my parents don't talk about their feelings or emotions. It's really hard. And so having people who want to talk about this with me, who are willing to have the conversation, and we're flowing in the same mindset, it's so satisfying and gratifying.
No, that's so beautiful, because we talk about vibe shifts all the time, but there is genuinely this vibrational cellular shift that does happen when you're in an environment where there's good food, there's good cannabis, but beyond that, there's so much intention put into the curation that you're being taken care of. I've gone to infused dinners where I'm like, okay, the food was great, I got stoned, but I don't know who these people are. I don't know what is going on here, and I'm kind of tweaking a little bit. But I've mostly been to events where I've done my research into who's curating the space, and there's those layers of intentionality, those layers of care that are baked into every single step, like you're saying, and just that creative freedom as well. And that's what I really love about gathering people in this kind of food-focused cannabis setting, is that not only is everyone in high spirits, pun intended, but they also feel fully taken care of and at ease, because that's what happens when you're being fed. You think about how so many of our comfort memories are tied into food. We're feeling comforted and we're feeling held. And it's really a beautiful thing. I mean, I've yet to attend one of your events, but every single time I do even see just the surface level social media posts, I am jealous. Because the food looks incredible, the outfits look incredible. Everyone really shows up in some fits to these events, from what I can tell.
Yeah, our last event was fucking fire. When Wendy came up to me and she told me this idea, I was like, wait, what? And I'm like thinking on it. And I was like, okay, I see it. And it just, the way it evolved into this like Magu goddess garden party fashion collaboration with these like hot young like Chinese designer was so cool. And it brought to life our vision and storytelling and like what we've been building on. And like we invited people to come dressed in goddess chic, and they showed up. It was amazing. And then people come dressed in their traditional clothes too. Like I fucking love it.
Yeah. So what Christina's referring to is like the goddess garden party. It had a lot of cool significance for me because, as a chef, not only am I cooking, but I also see myself as an artist. Cooking is my craft, is how I express the art. And so I think a lot about what is the role of the artist, right? You're trying to express a point of view that is perhaps like creating some kind of statement on human conditions and how to help people see things in a new way. And I think that's a lot of what we try to do with Mogu Magu. So even beyond the food, the visual of it, what media gets created out of that, which food is a huge part of. So about a year ago, we did this photo shoot because I thought, oh my gosh, it would be so badass to turn a lot of these like Chinese tropes on its head. So I think everyone's kind of seen those like Chinese old ancient scrolls where you see like scholars imbibing in the garden. And it's always male scholars, and women are always depicted more in the background, maybe serving tea or whatever, being demure in the corner somewhere. And I was like, what if we took that as the creative art inspo, but made it more about this reclamation of feminine power? So instead of male scholars, it's four magus imbibing in the garden. And so we had me, who was the fire cooking magu. So I had all these like beautiful smoke bombs in my wok, and we were just creating all kinds of photo magic. And we had our friend Rachel, who is a East Asian art expert, and so she was the scholar magu, and Christina was the hostess magu, and our wee mushroom auntie Ophelia was the alchemist magu. And so we depicted these powerful magus with a mix of traditional garments from Chinese culture, as well as a lot of styling pieces that are very modern. Like I had leather boots with traditional Chinese dresses and things like that. So there's this like powerful reclamation in the imagery. If you go to the Mogu Magu website, you'll see these photos. And then this year, our big goal was, how do we bring this to life? How do we invite others for their own reclamation? How do we invite others into the world of Magu and help them become their own Magus? And that's when we came up with this idea of doing a goddess garden party where everyone can dress up like Magu, or they can also check out some of these new hot indie Asian designers who are coming out with clothes that do exactly that borrow from traditional, beautiful silk Chinese garments, but they stitch them into these beautiful, cool streetwear with jeans and braid denim and things like that. So it was just such a eyegasm looking at all the ways that people everyone really took on their own inner magu, and you can just see whether it's cannabis or fashion or some other kind of conscious shifting plant medicine, how it can just help shift our consciousness a little bit and help us see things differently, including ourselves.
We'll be right back with more Jazz Cabbage. Welcome back to Jazz Cabbage.
Magu is the Taoist hemp goddess of longevity, and she shows up in Taoism. She shows up in a lot of scholarly writings, ancient scholarly writings, especially in paintings. And that's what our friend Rachel Du did. We just went through old ancient depictions of Magu to analyze it. And what we saw was she was very often depicted with hemp. So here we have a character who, in our culture, in our history, that used cannabis and hemp as medicine to heal people, to heal all of Asia. And we have recorded documentation from Emperor Shenneng, who was basically the godfather of traditional Chinese medicine, writing about cannabis being used to treat gout and rheumatism. So cannabis was used medicinally. And through this exploration, it really inspired us to look at cannabis as a healing medicine, right? How do we use this? How does Mogu Magu become a place where we are healing ourselves and each other through this plant? And what Wendy was saying too about this concept of neutro and like this, the dress, like her food and her as an artist, is also this taking elements of the old and blending them with the new and creating something that is both familiar and comforting, but presented in a new, modern, refreshing take that suits us and our needs. And so I feel like the style of cooking that we've been seeing and collaborating and creating is very much like it's farm to table modern Asian cuisine in a way that hasn't been done, but then also alongside cannabis. Like cannabis is a big piece of it, but it's not front and center. It's always there, not the food isn't always infused. And I think what a lot of these like cannabis infused culinary dinners that I see people are hosting or that we've all attended, it's fancy food and maybe there's a point of view, but just because the food is fancy doesn't necessarily mean it tells a story. And what I love about Wendy's food is it's upscale, it's elegant, but it's also homey and comforting.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, Wendy, you have to tell them about the Mapo Bolognese that we just made.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We were up at Tina's farm and Mume Farms in Southern Humboldt. And she hooked us up with all of these amazing organic produce from Brycelands, which is one of her neighbors who grows stuff up there. Incredible produce. And I made a mapo tofu gravy to go with and combine that with a traditional bolognese gravy. And it was just incredible. And then Christina made her famous cannabis leaf pasta. And I mean, people's minds were just blown. So, because it was like fresh pasta made with Tina's leaves that we just harvested from the backyard with this mapo tofu, farm to table bolognese. I mean, the flavors were just out of control. Like, it was so balanced that you could taste the mapo tofu, like the fermented bean paste flavor profiles and the umami-ness of it was definitely very front and center. But the beautiful, sweet, caramelized carrots and mirepoix of the bolognese really shine through too. It kind of was like an impromptu thing we came up with on the spot. You know, we were just kind of waiting to see what inspires us from the farm, the local farms. And we're like, we got to run this one back. More people need to taste this. This is such an iconic dish.
It is really silly of me to not eat lunch before hopping on this call because now I'm like salivating at my desk right now.
All of the meals, like everything we were cooking was so much fun. And like, as we were sitting there serving this, we looked at each other in the kitchen and it was a meteor shower that night. And there was magic in them hills. And we spoke the idea out loud to do a Mogu Magu cookbook based on this concept of this like mashup of like Asian cuisine with kind of like modern farm to table taste. And we're like, but also inspired by all of our friends and our collaborators. You know, we did a Panay party that had lumpia. We've done like handmade halo halo bar. And we're like, oh shit, like this is a cookbook.
And what I really love I love everything that you've said and everything that goes into the layers of intention baked into the events that you all do, but specifically thinking about this goddess energy. What draws me the most to the work that you all do is it really is this larger reclamation of that kind of energy and this reclamation really of the divine feminine. I mean, in talking about cannabis, this is a feminine plant. It's a female plant that grows the flowers that we're able to smoke. And so much of that kind of divine feminine earth goddess energy is often paved over in larger cannabis culture to kind of make way for this very rugged, staunch, masculine energy that has been very pervasive in cannabis culture for, decades now. And what I love is not only is it a reclamation of this divine feminine goddess energy, but it's also very much so rooted in, like you were saying, Christina, this reclamation of culture and this storytelling and being able to look to the past and really bring in all of these influences from the past into this modern context and say, not only is this our art, but it's our culture as well. And I just think that that kind of work is not only so necessary, but really just so potent and so powerful as someone who identifies as a culinary spiritualist, because eating good food changes us on that cellular, on that vibrational level. And not only does it change us, but when we're able to pull from our past and from our heritage, it allows us, like you were saying, to create moments of healing that kind of have this ripple effect through our ancestry and through our heritage and through our timelines. And it's really incredible to see how you all have been able to build that into everything you're doing with Mogu Magu, and to really celebrate and uplift this long-standing relationship between cannabis and Asian culture. I mean, cannabis has been cultivated in Asia since the start for over 12,000 years now. And yet it seems to me, as an outsider at least, that there is this double-edged stigma that can exist with being Asian in cannabis, both from an external sort of cultural taboo standpoint and also from inequities that are within the industry itself. I would love to have you both speak to how continuing to curate this space not only addresses those stigmas, but, as you said, how it creates these opportunities for healing for the community you've built.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That's so beautiful that that's how you're receiving us. I think in retrospect, everything seems so thoughtful and meant to be. But as we're building it, we're not like, oh, this is what the community needed, so let's build it for them. I mean, yes, that's a part of it. But as we're going through it, honestly, we're building it for ourselves, because I think even though people often see Christina and I as being very loud and proud Asians, like, we didn't always feel that way. And in fact, we don't always feel that way now. I think this work helps us to continue to do that, because when we started going down this path, exploring this Magu figure, is when we started getting a deeper understanding of even Taoism. And what was cool was that of all these like ancient mythologies, Taoism is one of the only ones, even compared to like Greek mythology and things like that, where the gods and goddesses had equal power. It wasn't like the goddesses, just because they were feminine, that they were less powerful. In fact, Taoism preaches a lot about feminist values and about decentralizing power and about the non-binary. So I was just getting so excited when I was learning all this. I was like, wow, growing up as an Asian kid and as a Chinese kid in China, I never felt like my culture reflected how I felt on the inside. And the more that I explored Taoism, I was like, holy shit, there were probably other badass women back then and who were feeling this way we did and fighting the way we do. And of course, their stories are not as told or erased. And so a lot of why we do what we do is also for us to reclaim parts of our culture that we have maybe even rejected because we didn't see ourselves reflected in it. And so as we do this work, we want to share with everybody that cannabis is a birthright to Chinese folks, to Asians, as it is the earliest recording of it being grown and used there. There's so much, if you just start exploring, there's so much in our history that has been erased. And so we just want to bring that back and make folks feel less stigma, to make them feel more seen by the history that we do have that they just may not know about.
Yeah. And what I love is Magu is the figure. And so Mogu Magu is inspired by Magu, this hemp goddess of longevity. And Mogu means mushroom. And Magu is the like maiden or auntie, and Ma is the character for cannabis or hemp is written in her name. So it's like the hemp auntie. And so Mogu Magu means mushroom weed auntie. And that's the character that Wendy and I try to embody when we are hosting a Mogu Magu. It's like, we're your rad mushroom weed aunties. And we just want to like provide these opportunities and share. But what I love what you said too is just cannabis is this healing. This is healing medicine, and food is medicine. Food is healing. There's a reason why it's comforting. At all of our events, we try to have a plate of sliced fruit. because for us in our culture, you get in a fight with your parents and they want to say they're sorry. They'll never say the words they're sorry. You're just going to get a plate of sliced fruit like slid next to you. And that means I love you, I'm sorry. And so that's such a beautiful thing that it's like culturally, you know what that means. And serving soup, making like soup is also a way to say that I love you. And Wendy recently made this really beautiful chicken soup for a few of our friends who were sick and not feeling well, and like healed them through her soup.
Yeah, sometimes we joke about Mogu Magu being the wee Chinatown. I was, telling Christina how I see Mogu Magu gatherings turning into wee Chinatown, because historically, Chinatowns in the U.S. Served as immigrant hubs. So when you first get here from China, you go get set up there. You go figure out what are your papers that you need to get, what kind of business are you trying to establish, who do you need to talk to do those things, and how do you get connected with a network to be able to support your new livelihood in this new country. And so that's kind of what happens at Mogu Magu. We go to a lot of these like industry networking events, and I'm like, man, I just want to be at a cookout, So how do you make people feel like they're at a cookout, but then they get the benefit of like those industry networking events? And it turns out actually they go very much hand in hand, because when people are bonding through shared experiences and shared values and goals, the way that they're businesses can align is much more seamless. So people come and they make friendships, and then they start collaborating with each other. The different indie entrepreneur brands start hiring the different creatives to create content together. All kinds of different connections are made. We love facilitating that. We love being able to make other people feel like they can find other folks who share their vision for the industry to usher all of that future in together.
Also, if you want to know who makes the infused mooncakes and Pockies and the Filipino flavored gummies and all of those things that have like the Asian flair, coming to a Mogu Magu event is where you meet all those people.
I need infused Pocky in my life yesterday. That sounds like something that
really
I
good.
Didn't know I was missing my entire life, but now that I know, I will not be able to rest. So looks like I'm finding a flight to LA.
I know. Oh, Wendy, you need to tell them the mooncake story with your dad.
Oh my gosh. So the Pockies, my dad, he's such an influencer. He doesn't even know it. So my dad came out to support one of our Mogu Magus, and he was having such a great time. And of course, everybody treated him like the VIP uncle. So he was offered so many different things. And one of the things he was offered is a marijuana mooncake. And he sees it and he's like, oh, this must look so harmless, because it's so familiar, and he loves mooncakes. So I'm pretty sure people told him it was infused, but he's just so curious. He wants to try it anyways. It was like 40 milligrams. He maybe ate like 3/4, which is like 30 milligrams. And he was like, oh, Wendy, I don't feel my fingers. I don't know what's going on. And I was like, oh man, I had no idea he ate it either. And so I was like, is he contact high from the event? And I was like, nobody gets this contact high. And so, we start asking questions like, what did you eat? Or did you eat this? Did you eat that? And then we came to find out he consumed the mooncakes. And so when I had told my friends who make the mooncakes, they were of course mortified, but I'm like, it's not you guys' fault. He just doesn't know. I'm like, it is quite high though, 40 milligrams. Some people need high dosage, but I think majority of people, especially people starting off, I always recommend like 2.5, 5 milligrams to start off. And then you can kind of see what that kind of effects have on you to then consume more if you need to. And so they ended up making these Pockies that were very microdose, so they're only 1 milligram each. So it's perfect for beginners like my dad, or those of us who just love Pocky and wants to eat 10 in one setting. So, I told my dad, I was like, you're quite the influencer. You influence them to launch a whole new product line.
really just like blazing trails. I mean, that's definitely a reminder to folks that like if you're at an infused event, just ask what the milligrammage is. Ask, is this okay for a beginner? Someone will absolutely help you with that. But it's beautiful to hear, I mean, aside from the fact that he couldn't necessarily feel his fingers, but in general, it's beautiful to hear this story of your dad, of an older person, of a person from a past generation being curious in this way and feeling empowered to engage with cannabis because it was in a format that was familiar to him through this mooncake. And that's something that I really do love and take to heart when it comes to this intersection of food and cannabis, because as our culinary histories are very individual and very cultural, so is our cannabis use. It's very personalized. It depends on each person's, physiology, background, culture. But it's really beautiful that being able to infuse food means we are able to literally infuse culture with this cannabis and literally bring it to people in a way that is not only familiar, but really allows them to feel, like I said before, at ease and feel cared for because it's something that's familiar, instead of maybe it's a cosmic brownie and someone's like, I don't know what this is or where I'm going. But it's really lovely that there is a world of possibility out there to be able to bring this plant medicine to people in these formats that fit kind of seamlessly into their lives. So as we wrap up here, the last question I really want to ask is just, what are your kind of hopes and dreams and visions for the future of Mogu Magu, but also for this intersection of food and cannabis in general?
By us creating these types of events, even and our own individual events outside of Mogu Magu as well, it's all about this intersection of culinary and cannabis and that familiar. And when you get people into a familiar food situation where they feel safe and they know that they're going to be okay, they're more willing to try. Like Wendy's dad, after that experience and seeing a lot of our events and seeing us having a good time together, was more open-minded to try. Another one of our friends, her mom had never smoked a joint before, but because she saw a group of women hanging out, having fun, cooking, smoking, she was like, oh, well, that doesn't look so bad. Maybe I want to try. And then her and her mom smoked and shared a joint together in a really long, deep conversation. And that's what we want to see more of. I think that's, as this evolves and where we're focusing, we want to share more of those stories. We want to create opportunities to make this media exist in the world, because when you see cannabis alongside food and being shared in this healing way, it's not this horrible, evil drug that we've been taught and told that it is. Like, there's beauty and there's magic and healing in it. And so whether that's more events, we want to do, we filmed a travel series. So we're going to be doing a YouTube travel series, which sparked the cookbook, which sparked maybe a retreat on the mountain next year. And so we're always open, collaborations, like each idea and each partner and collaborator begets yet another fabulous idea.
Yeah, I think Christina really hit the nail on the head when she said, we were trying to create opportunities for, more of these media to inspire people. I think as much as we get a lot of love on social around our even recaps, I know it leaves people with a bit of a FOMO. And I am really determined to turn that FOMO into action. So instead of having it come off as, these privileged folks who get to find community like this in LA, because I know it's not safe for everyone to do this everywhere they are at, or they may not feel like they can access the community to do that. We definitely recognize the privilege we have, being where we are, being who we are, having the access to protection of the people that we have. How can we make this more accessible? How can we not just create FOMO, but how do we create inspo for action? How can we create toolkits for other folks to create community and gatherings and healings on their own, which is why we've kind of taken this show on the road, or the cookbook, or other types of media that we want to create, because we really just want to inspire others to kind of join this movement.
And I love that because it really does speak to that idea that all boats rise with the tide. And I feel like, especially in cannabis, we have this opportunity to really model that. There really are so many opportunities for collaboration as opposed to competition. And it's something that I love not only about cannabis, but about food as well. And that's why this intersection just has such a special place in my heart. And also, I'm so inspired, so inspired by the work that you both do. And I cannot wait to get my butt on a plane to LA and come back and have some of those Pocky and experience this Mapo Tofu Bolognese and get into all of the good stuff. So Wendy, Christina, thank you again for coming on the show, for chatting with me. It really is such a privilege and an honor to have you both be on here, to have you both be a part of this inaugural season of Jazz Cabbage, for just having you both be a part of my life and my community. It really is such an honor, and you're both just so incredible.
Aw, the feeling is mutual. You have an open invite to come stay and visit anytime.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what all you create from this. I'm so excited to also hear from all the other perspectives that you're going to invite on this show.
Oh, yes, we got a lineup of heavy hitters this season. But before I let you both go, I would love to know where our listeners can find you.
You can follow Mogu Magu on Instagram at Mogu, M-O-G-U, Magu, M-A-G-U .la. And our website, if you want to sign up for our email list, which is where you'll get all of the first look invites to our events, is mogumagu.co. And I'm Christina and Fruit and Flower on Instagram.
And I'm Wendy Zheng at When You're Hungry on Instagram. That's WENYER, hungry.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Check out our show notes to learn more about our guests and other cannabis resources. Jazz Cabbage is produced by Taylor Early, H. Conley, and me, Chala June. Sound design and mixing is by Sam Gerardi. Jazz Cabbage is powered by Simplecast. Jazz Cabbage, hosted by Chala June, is a production of Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe. For more Jazz Cabbage shenanigans, find us on Instagram at Jazz Cabbage Pod. If you want to drop me a note, you can write to the pod at jazzcabbagepodcast@gmail.com.